Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the Young Engineers panel today. It's one of the many exciting events to celebrate the World Engineering Day 2022. The World Engineering Day is a UNESCO International Day of Celebration of Engineering and Engineers, proclaimed at the 40th General Conference of UNESCO in 2019. It's a celebration of a global event that holds every 4th of March since 2020. The day offers an opportunity to highlight engineers and engineering achievements in our modern world and improve public understanding of how engineering and technology are central to modern life and for sustainable development. Today, we have an outstanding panel of young engineers and leaders from the World Federation of Engineering Organizations, International Federation of Consulting Engineers, Young Leaders Council, European Young Engineers, the Students Platform for Engineering Education and Development SPEED, and the UNEP Major Group for Children and Youth. It's a huge pleasure to introduce these young panelists that are doing great things in their sector, and they'll be speaking on an inspiring and collective young engineering vision in engineering a sustainable future. And it's perfectly aligned with the 2022 World Engineering Day theme, which is Build Back Wiser, Engineering the Future. Huge pleasure in no particular order to introduce to you Firas Diab, the chairman of the World Federation of Engineering Organizations, Young Engineers and Future Leaders. He's the national representative from Lebanon, a project manager, a senior transportation engineer in the Middle East, in Africa, and in the Arab Gulf region. A board member of the Order of Engineers and Architects from Lebanon, and he's been leading young engineers globally towards attaining and achieving the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Welcome to the panel, Firas.
Thank you.
I think I need to also mention, as an engineer, he holds a master's degree in civil engineering from the American University of Beirut and a diploma in civil engineering from the Lebanese University. I'll be going on to Nadja Yang. Nadja Yang is the president of the European Young Engineers. She's based out of Germany. She's currently pursuing a PhD in systems engineering at Oxford University, and she researches on urban microeconomy. I think that should be like a separate presentation altogether for her to unpack what that means. So she is a list maker of the Forbes 30 under 30, which is for German-speaking countries. She's a German Rhodes Scholar, a One Young World Ambassador. She studied chemical engineering at the Technical University of Munich, and she is also researching on resource efficiency policies from the Tsinghua University in Beijing, and also change management and circular economy at the University of Sao Paulo. She holds a lot of work experience in industry policy and consulting, both for public and private sector organizations. Welcome to the panel, Nadja.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure.
Super. So next on the list is Rodrigo. Rodrigo is the vice chair of the Federation of the FIDIC, which is the consulting group, Federation of, I think I missed the name right now. So he holds a civil engineering degree from Monterrey Institute of Technology and Higher Studies from Mexico. He holds a master's degree in construction management and engineering from the University of Leeds, and is pursuing a PhD in project management also from the University of Leeds. He worked at the Texas Transportation Institute with Parsons Corporation, and is an external consultant with the Inter-American Development Bank. He is the vice chair of the Young Professionals Group of Mexican Chamber of Consulting Companies, and he also, the one I missed, the vice chair of the Future Leaders Council at the International Federation of Consulting Engineers. So welcome to the panel, Rodrigo. Sorry I made a mess of that introduction.
No problem. My pleasure to be here.
Fantastic, fantastic. Now I'll go to Maria Laura Polo Gonzalez. Maria Laura is the Vice President of Educational Content and also President-elect of the Students Platform for Engineering Education and Development, SPEED. She's the US rep and SPEED is a global organization. She's like I said, the president-elect of the group, and she's an environmental engineer from the Universidad de los Andes in Colombia. She's fascinated with nature, biological systems, and anthropological processes. She has a true passion for education, no question. She's works very hard to promote a cooperative network and experience that generates a positive effect for engineering on society and the environment. And she's currently pursuing further studies at in New York City. And she has an unruly kitten named Azula. I thought I needed to mention that. Welcome to the panel, Maria Laura.
Thank you, Christopher. It's a pleasure to be here.
Fantastic. So I'll be your moderator. I'm the Vice President of the International Renewable Energy Systems, Inc. I hold a master's degree in systems engineering from the Imperial College in London and a bachelor's degree in civil engineering, United Nations affiliated technical reviewer, a national delegate in the group that Firas leads in the World Federation of Engineering Organization. And I work with mentors with youth around the world to foster the development of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. I think it's about time to pass it on to the panelists now. So I'm going to go exactly in the same order to ask the panelists to tell us a bit more about what they're doing to foster sustainable development in line with the UN SDGs. So Firas, the table is yours, please.
Greetings, everyone. I'm happy to be part of this panel, and thank you, Christopher, for moderating this webinar today, which is part of the celebrations we're doing on the World Engineering Day on the 4th of March. I'm here from representing the World Federation of Engineering Organization, which is founded in 1968 under the auspices of UNESCO. It brings together national engineering institutions and engineers from all over the globe. The committee that I have the pleasure to chair is a motivated team of engineers that work voluntarily, making the committee acknowledged as the young voices or the voices of young engineers. And we have a role to enable a system or an ecosystem of sustainable development in terms of platform and in terms of support. And we highlight on the role of young engineers worldwide to achieve the agenda of 2030 in terms of UN SDGs. And as part of the World Engineering Day, we are thrilled to announce that on the 4th of March, we will be announcing the results of the hackathon, which was an overall a global engineering competition between engineering students, focusing on challenges which are directly related to the Sustainable Development Goals.
Fantastic.
Thank you again, Christopher, for today, and I'm happy to hear everyone here.
Super. Thanks a lot for that introduction. If you haven't checked, please go on the WFEO website or just check on Google to see the World Engineering Day Hackathon and what it's all about. I think you'd be glad you did. I'll be passing on the mic to Nadja Yang. So Nadja Yang, the floor is yours. Please tell us a bit more about the amazing work you're doing as a young professional in your field.
Yes, greetings from Oxford, first of all. As Christopher mentioned, I am leading the European Young Engineers at the moment, also abbreviated as I or EYE, so both can work. For those who don't know this organization, let me give you a brief introduction about that first. So we are the largest young engineering organization in Europe right now, representing 500,000 young engineers, and not only students, as Christopher implied, but also young professionals, but also high school students, etc. So a big range of different young engineers who associate themselves as young and affiliated with the engineering field. So right now we are represented in more than 20 countries with more than 30 member organizations, as we are the umbrella organization of national engineering associations. and we represent all kinds of engineering disciplines. We already exist since 1994, so more than 25 years, with the basis of building a strong engineering network in Europe. So we are organizing twice a year conferences throughout Europe. So our next one will actually be very soon from 5th to 8th of May in Lisbon. So whoever wants to join, please, like the tickets will be sold very soon. But we go to all kinds of countries. Next ones will be in Denmark, Netherlands, Estonia. So yeah, we try to really highlight our national organizations like efforts and like in the engineering field. But more, other than that, we also like work together with partners. Like our next challenge will be with Audi, which will be a sprint challenge about recycling of batteries in electric vehicles. So very big and grand challenges that are upcoming. As like we also cover all very diverse fields of different topics, as our engineers are very multidisciplinary. So we cover energy topics, water reuse, circular economy, and future of work topics. But also engineering education is a topic which is very dear to our heart. So it's my pleasure to especially talk with SPEED, but also all the other organizations that very fight for and care about how engineering education should look like in the future. What makes us quite unique is our focus nowadays also on bridging the gap between technology and policy, because we saw that young people are more engaged in the public debate, which we think is awesome. But we did feel that a lot of people with STEM affiliation are not as visible and also not as heard so much, in our opinion, especially with the expertise in technological fields when we talk about policy making, etc. And we do think for innovations to come and like technologies to thrive that can help us with grand challenges like the climate change or like the digitalization, we think policy frameworks are very important, but those who make the decisions are often people who do not understand technologies as well. So this is where we try to, for example, with one of our projects like Network for European Engineers in Politics, to bring together those politicians who already exist, and there are very few in Europe, unfortunately, and give them a platform for exchange, but also inspire young people to think beyond their traditional field of engineering, because some engineers might have an interest in being a policymaker or shaping the public sector, but they just don't know how. So we try to connect them with role models and also influence, like talk to the European Commission, etc. So yeah, a lot of grand challenges to come, but I'm happy to chat about it later in the conversation.
Fantastic. Thanks so very much for that introduction, Nadja. Just as you were making your point, I recall there's a working group in the World Federation of Engineering Organization that Firas leads that actually works within that intersection, that brings together young engineers and tries to just get us a bit more involved in lobbying, in understanding the issues around climate policy and actually leading that conversation. I think there's a touch point there, and maybe you and Firas may need to connect after the webinar and just share notes and see how you can move things forward. I know a couple of lobbyists that are involved in that space as well. One, I think, is Thomas Friedroff, his name is, from the Netherlands, and the other is Alexander Stomels from, I think, Belgium. So there's quite a number of, connections that you could potentially pull together and take things forward as you do a lot of the work, amazing work that you do. So I'll move on to Rodrigo. So Rodrigo Juárez, tell us a bit more about the work that you do, please. Yes.
Yeah, sure. So, well, first of all, FIDIC, it's the International Federation of Consulting Engineers, which was founded in 1913 and currently has its headquarters in Geneva in Switzerland. So basically FIDIC acts as the global representative body for national associations of consulting engineers. It represents over 1 million engineer professionals worldwide and over 40,000 firms in more than 100 countries. FIDIC is in charge of promoting and implementing the consulting engineering industry's strategic goals on behalf of the member associations, and it aims to disseminate information and resources that are of interest to its members. FIDIC, it's very well known for the publication of international standard forms of contracts for infrastructure development, but it also publishes a lot of business practice documents, quality management, risk management, sustainability management, and integrity management. Mainly FIDIC's key role is that its member associations around the world is to improve people's quality of life through the promotion of quality, integrity, and sustainability in the infrastructure industry and projects and services it delivers on a global scale. Particularly the committee or the advisory council that I'm working on, it's the Future Leaders, where I'm the vice chair, as you mentioned. So basically what we do is that, well, we are a group of professionals under the age of 40, which are considered young. I'm younger than that, but yeah, which are usually appointed by the FIDIC board with the objective to advise the federation on a number of different activities, such as identifying opportunities and promoting the interests of future leaders, to create or develop spaces for them to contribute and develop within the wider FIDIC community and the industry. We create targeted activities for future leaders to increase their exposure and opportunities for them to engage with other external stakeholders. We advise the FIDIC board and the secretariat on different aspects in which future leaders see themselves developing within the consulting engineering industry. And we also provide a space or platform for future leaders to participate actively within FIDIC and with their peers to develop as the next generation of consulting engineers in the consulting engineering industry. So yeah, there's a lot of committees that FIDIC has apart from the future leaders. There's bigger committees that, for example, the sustainability committee is very active. It was recently in COP26, and it advocates for, best practices in sustainability from the infrastructure development sector. So yeah, FIDIC is very active, and there's a lot of things going on. So it's definitely great to be here.
Wow, that's an amazing array of activities you've got going on, both within the Young Leaders Council and the wider FIDIC body. Thanks a lot for that intro, Rodrigo. And last but not the least on my list is Laura. Yeah, so Maria Laura, there's so much you've got on your CV, and I just can't wait to hear a lot more about what you do with the Student Platform for Engineering Education and Development. Please, the floor is yours. Tell us a bit more about your work.
Thank you. Well, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you to WFEO for the invitation. It's really exciting to be here with such outstanding colleagues and young engineering leaders. So for those of you who don't know SPEED is the Student Platform for Engineering Education Development, and we are a worldwide nonprofit student organization. So we are formed by students and we work for students. We function as an independent platform, which gives a space for dialogue between students, academia, civil society, and industry. And the exchange promotes cooperative work and networking and cultural and professional experiences towards a common goal, which is generating a positive effect on engineering on society and the environment, and particularly the participation of students in the decision-making process. So SPEED was born in 2006, and over the past 17 years, we've worked to establish the voice of engineering students around the globe in our 5 pillars of action, which are education, inclusion, diversity, equity, and access, mental health and well-being, peace engineering, and climate action and sustainability. Our main goal is to impress on engineering students the importance of our role in developing solutions for a sustainable world, while also facilitating knowledge and skills that they might not acquire in a regular setting as university, for them to pursue this personally and professionally. Over the past 10 years or so, we have developed workshops, design challenges, hackathons, panels, and these sorts of activities specifically aimed at tackling the environmental crisis from a holistic perspective. So we've done a lot of work on sustainability, sustainable development goals, but we have also touched often on the topic of the role of young engineers and students within the community, which is not always as relevant as we might want. With the work we do, we motivate engineers to take action towards reshaping their communities in an integral way, and the communities that surround them, where they can have an impact and thus create global impact. Since the beginning of SPEED, our flagship event is the GSF. It's called the Global Student Forum. And it's a student-led global conference that draws academicians, representatives from industry, nonprofit organizations, and students from all around the world to discuss issues on engineering education. And currently we have a strategic alliance with the International Federation of Engineering Education Societies, IFES, and we work to develop the student activities for the World Engineering Education Forum in collaboration with other organizations in the community. It's a yearly event, it's very exciting, and really anyone could participate. And just as a final word, through our work, we really strive to empower students and provide a collective platform where they can be active agents in shaping a sustainable and healthy and inclusive future.
Fantastic. Thank you so very much for that introduction and also telling us a bit more about SPEED there. Thanks, Maria Laura. So at this point, I'm going to say a big thank you to the panelists once again for joining the panel, and also thank all the sponsors and all the partners that have made this event possible. Thank you so very much. And more importantly, thank you to everyone who is joining this webinar. Thanks to everyone who is on the call at this time. And I think I would want to mention that if you've got any question, by all means, please drop them in the panel. We've got a couple of some questions that we're going to be asking the panelists already. But if you've got any other question as we go through the discussions, please, by all means, drop that. I'll be seeing that and I'll be running through them. So I think I will start just in the same order as we did the introduction by requesting Firas, who leads young engineers that a group in the World Federation of Engineering organization of 30 million professionals, and the young engineers group within that group, which in my mind is the biggest young engineers group in the world today, to tell us a bit more about his advice so far leading the group. What advice, Firas, will you give to young engineers as they do the kind of work that you do to promote the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and to have positive impact as they do this?
You know, the Paris Declaration between UNESCO and WFEO in 2018, it was part of the WFEO 50th anniversary. It stated that the Federation needs to work on the sustainable development with engineers to advance the 2030 agenda. The declaration gives rise to an action plan to be taken by the members of the technical committee and the executive council, as well as our partners. We believe that implementing these, engineers need to work and have an important role in implementing the UN SDGs. We think that, for example, for SDG 6, SDG 7, goal number by creating resilient and strong infrastructure, goal number 9, and goal 11, which are the livable cities, are very important. Achieving these targets will need engineers to integrate solutions by providing resilient infrastructure, sustainable energy, and access to the latest communication technologies. you know, that we need to bridge the new world with what's happening. Young engineers will need to leverage the existing technology and go to future development in ICT, in example, artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, and like 3D printing, and provide tools for integrated solutions in sustainable development. Also, young engineers can play an important role in SDGs by planning and building projects that preserve natural resources, projects that are cost efficient, and support the human and natural resources. We need to look into a closed loop ecosystem to illustrate the many role of engineers that have in SDGs. And I can say that a very positive outcome from the WFEO Young Engineer Future Leaders was to engage young engineers in the federation, and the ability to give the young engineers to speak a new language, which is the language of empowering, and go directly to work on the issues which are hot topics like climate change, like resilient cities, resilient infrastructure, and especially in the developed countries. I believe that this message has great effect on the young engineers, and I do believe that the hot topics that we're facing in the different nations or in the different countries that we present will need young engineers to think into a proactive way and to think of issues and focus on finding solutions that will change the globe in the coming 10 and 20 years. Thank you, Christopher.
Thanks a lot for that, Firas. Really, really insightful there. There's some touch points that you highlighted, and I think it ties very neatly into what Nadja also talked about, which is that intersection between developing a strong technical base and then transforming that into leadership, into developing systems that help to push forward the realization of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals across board, developed and developing countries as well. Nadja, I want to maybe touch on one of the introductions that you made about the future of work and driving growth while looking beyond just what the problems that we face today, but the future problems that are to come, and how that rolls into human impact. How can young engineers who are going to be driving the future engineers, understand and better apply solutions that consider human impact in relation to the Sustainable Development Goals and also climate change? What are your thoughts on these, Nadja?
Yes, thank you for mentioning that. So I think in general, it is really important for each and every person, and especially also young engineers, to know your own purpose. Because if you don't know why you're doing something, your impact can be very limited. It can happen for anybody, but like for engineers, if you work on an engine every day, maybe sometimes you forget about why it's so important to improve and optimize this engine. Like if you don't have the wider picture in your head. So I think to increase your human impact, you should first of all know your context of why you're doing something and what you specifically are doing, where it fits in the bigger picture. Because only then, at least for myself, I can be continuously passionate and motivated about what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. So this is the second part, having passion. Because there are so many glamorous things that you can do in the world nowadays. But I think if you are in the end not intrinsically passionate about something, you will very quickly lose your interest and lose your drive to do something, which will also decrease your impact on the longer run, in my opinion. And I think in general nowadays, like we are having these privileges that a majority of the, or a big part of the world is now getting more and more developed. So the more developed you are, the less you only think about the needs you have. So people have also personal impact, like they want to create impact and not only create money or something out of their work. So I think this ties in again with the first parts that I'm saying. So if you, like, people are not satisfied anymore if they don't see any kind of tangible achievements after a while. But of course you can, like, I think within the impact, like sometimes I tend to see people who just want to create one impact after the other, which means like 1-2 months project or like very short project after another, and feel like, okay, they have achieved something, which I think it's like, if it's always what you do, then there might be a risk of like instant gratification, if you can say so, because one gets so much more satisfaction out of like getting immediate responses that what you're doing is good. But sometimes for the bigger things to happen, like it's really sometimes just the tiny bits of feedbacks, or even no feedback after a year or something, and so like, and then you don't know whether you have made impact or not. But if you have the wider picture, which comes back to what I said at the beginning, your purpose, then you can create impact. So this is for the general impact question. Now you asked about the SDGs and climate change. I mean, I think the SDGs are very, very nice to give like specific areas of your area of influence that you can take. And I think it's also helpful for oneself to decide like where you can really have this combination of purpose-driven and also passion together, because you just cannot tackle all of the goals at the same time, right? Like we are just limited in our resources. So I think following like the rough framework that I've given before, I think picking one area, for me, for example, I'm very passionate about climate change. So Rodrigo mentioned the COP26. I was also attending back then. I think for the COP, at least I was noticing that science, like especially activists and policymakers, were very present at COP. Also maybe some corporate organizations, etc. But I personally found it a little bit hard to find all the like people with engineers or also like the STEM people there. Maybe it was my own impression. I have met some member organizations of FIDIC, for example, there, but I just felt like not yet. We have joined forces together. Like as like now we can see it's happening slowly with the World Engineering Day, but which is only like happening from 2018 on. But engineers exist for so long, right? So you can see that these developments are kind of also recent in some sense, and I think we're going into the right direction. But I think for increasing human impact, it's also so important to not think only as you as a one person, which I don't think anybody of us is doing. But it's also not about only thinking as us as one organization, but like this is also the reason why we all come together as representatives of our organizations, because I think only with joint forces across organizations, across continents, etc., we can create really big human impact. So I think, the idea of joining forces is really important to maximize your impact overall. And especially for climate change, it's a global issue. We cannot just think in our own national borders or continental borders. So I very appreciate that we can sit here together, but ideally it evolves from here. As you already gave me the introduction of Firas is working on that, and Rodrigo's group is working on the other things, and I do see a lot of synergies. And I think like it's one thing to know about the synergies that might be possible, but then it's up to us whether we think we can make use of the synergies. And also in our audience right now, I bet there are people with so high potential sitting there. Now it's your turn to reach out to us, or at least make yourself visible. So maybe we can join forces here as well.
Wow, I like the way you landed that. If you're listening and you know for a fact that you've got something huge to contribute to climate change, to the UN SDGs, please make yourself visible so we can tie our efforts together and punch harder, right? Those synergies are really important for the future. Thanks a lot, Nadja, for that. I think I'll ask a very similar question to Rodrigo. it's still about impact, but it's more about impact leadership. What does that look like for you?
Well, of course, this is just by itself, just the topic of leadership. You know, there's something that you could talk about that for hours and hours, and there are so many experts on that. But I mean, considering, let's say, with a definition of leadership, it's like a process of social influence in which we aim to maximize the efforts of others towards achieving a common goal that we all have. So it's something that it's not just about seniority, about the titles that we have or the position that we are working on, but about how we manage to support individuals to find, let's say, a trajectory or a path that somehow allows them to meet their individual goals towards our collective needs. So, I mean, when talking about leadership in engineering particularly, we need to think that it's like it's an approach that influences other people to effectively collaborate and solve big problems that we have. Definitely, when talking about engineering leadership and that creates an impact, it's very relevant because it does require a great degree of technical expertise, authenticity, and a creative way of coming up with alternative ways of solving problems. It requires a lot of dealing with people, personal effectiveness, and the ability to integrate and manage diverse expertise and skill sets from the people that are involved in this. Because in engineering, you have a wide range of engineering professions working together towards a common goal. So definitely, when talking about engineering leadership, it's a way that individuals and groups are able to implement transformative change, innovation, as a way to positively influence technology, organizations, communities, and society in the world. And taking some of the things that Nadja is saying, we need to operate with a vision. We need to focus on delivering what benefits the society, what's our purpose in delivering those wider benefits to meet the expectations that we are trying to solve. We need to be able to anticipate for some of the greater needs or the hot topics, let's say, as what Firas was saying, how we can contribute to those hot topics. And I would say that also, most of all, when you are acting in a leadership position, that you must operate with full integrity, because when we are talking about engineering, it's something that in the end has an effect on the life of the people. So we are doing something towards the greater needs of the population. And if you do that in a non-ethical way, then we are risking a lot of things. We are risking human lives in this. So something that, in my view, that's what I would say.
I love the way you started out and the way you landed. So first is make sure you've got a solid technical base competence to deliver your engineering goals and whatever engineering that you want to put together, and always have the public at the back of your mind, because whatever engineering you do, it's for the public, it's for the world, it's to make sure that the world is a better place for everyone. Fantastic. I think I'll just kind of from there, I'll go to Maria Laura. Maria Laura, you're doing quite a lot of work with engineering students, right? And just picking up the first part of what Rodrigo said, which is building a solid understanding, a technical base to actually launch out. How can we frame studying and working in engineering, science, and technology fields within a broader social context? What are your views on this?
Well, if you take that question just as is, it sounds like a difficult thing to do because engineering and science and STEM in general is perceived as a very technical field. But I think the way to frame it is to understand and keep in mind that in STEM, science for science's sake is not the ultimate goal, but it is a tool to achieve a better future, which is what everyone else has said. If we keep that in mind, that what we are doing is not just to make a better technology or to make something more efficient, but we are doing it to achieve a better future for our communities. So how this translates to young engineers, in my perspective, is that, for example, from studying, when you're studying in university, social context while you're studying may not be as relevant or as notorious because when we're in university, we sort of focus on specific problems and the technical abilities to solve them. But then when you enter an industry or a government organization, or basically when you enter a work environment, you realize how relevant social context is. And that goes from keeping in mind your company's mission statement to their goals, to integrating in the organizational culture, all the way to considering your stakeholders' interests and personal requirements. Because that way you will be able to create not only technical and technological solutions, but also sustainable solutions. And as engineers, what we really want is to be able to design a solution that we can implement easily in the community and that will be sustainable in time. And that means that people need to have a wish to use it and know how to use it. In my opinion, going from sustainability, it depends greatly on social context because it involves politics and public relationships and effective communication mainly, not only between peers, but also, with individuals and with communities. So besides the technical abilities that young engineers should have, they should also acquire communication abilities. And I don't like to say soft skills, but I have yet to find a word for it. Different types of abilities like, knowing public policy is important. You don't have to know it by word, but at least you have to know how to integrate with different parts and different stakeholders and different people that you will have to work with. As engineers, we're known for group working. When we're studying, we do group work and everything, but it's mainly between ourselves. So we sort of become used to thinking that the criteria of engineers is superior to our other social sciences. And we have a hard time integrating that mindset. So it's good for engineers to have other things in mind, not only have the community and the social context in the back of our heads, but actually take into account the people that surround us, the other professions and social scientists, and really integrate those things into our design process.
Wow. That was really, really very well said. Thank you, Maria Laura. I know, Firas, I'll come back to you now. I know there's quite a lot of work going on trying to tie together the social context and the issues that we face, global issues, with the technical competence of young professionals and young engineers. But just seeing the way Maria Laura put it, I'll ask a question. How is it, maybe just straightforward, is social technical thinking important in engineering education? What are your thoughts on this?
Research and engineering practices emphasizes on technical practices. Yet within the engineering education, relatively, you cannot see a content focusing on such interface. Content in the engineering curricula often ignores the broader range of socio-thinking context and focus only on engineering design. Most engineering curricula, they always give the technical over the social dimensions a privilege. And this, despite that professional engineers know that they need to understand the social contexts before designing. And they need to incorporate these social contexts into their projects. And in order to bridge this gap, I believe that the engineering curricula needs to have integration of socio-technical thinking in undergraduate programs, and they need to encourage the habits of mind and the issues which are related to socio-technical thinking, which is defined as interplay between the factors of the social and the problems that needs to be solved in engineering. And it is an umbrella term that cover multiple broad of dimensions like economy, environmental, ethical, health, and safety. So the issue when we think of this and when we need to tell the students or the engineering institutions that this is a very important thing to tackle, and it's very important for young engineers to have this privilege to think in a broader way while designing or figuring a solution for a global problem or an engineering problem. Thank you, Christopher.
Yes, thanks a lot, Firas. Yeah, I think I'm going to maybe just come back to Maria Laura. And the reason why is you touch on something she's touched on, and I see that connection between what you said. So Maria Laura, just thinking back about what you said, how to pull a lot more of the thinking or a lot more of conversation with the social context and, you know, people playing in the sort of social analysis and social assessment space into the technical thinking. How can engineering students bring all of that thinking and that's reaching out to the more social side of things and thinking into solving problems? How can engineering students work on problems that matter? And what kind of skill sets do we need to be able to tackle these complex global challenges that we face today?
Okay, so thank you for the question. There's a lot to unpack there, but I want to start by complementing something. We have talked about including social and socio-technological knowledge into curriculum. And generally, that would translate into specific actions that engineers will take in the process of design. For example, in Colombia, where I'm from, engineers are used to doing polls. So going out to communities and doing a set of questions to ask, you know, how the community feels about a certain solution. But that's as far as it will go. And once they develop a project, it's not often that they will do a follow-up with the community to see if they are actually, you know, integrating it into their lives. Sometimes it happens that they don't. So besides thinking, you know, including that into the engineering curriculum, what really needs to be done is to include it into the STEM culture. So in STEM, we have a very practical way of thinking. The culture of STEM is very practical, hierarchical, and we value that over symbolic or humanistic views of the world. A way to tackle that would be not only theoretically, but also including in universities interdisciplinary work between engineering students and other disciplines, mainly social disciplines, because that will help students get used to valuing those different points of views. And if they do that, they will see problems differently. For example, when I was in university, we developed a project where we went to an elderly home. that was charity and all of this. And as an engineer, as an environmental engineer, the first thing that I saw was the water system. And I wanted to improve the water system. But I was working with biomedical engineers and industrial engineers and electrical engineers, and everybody saw a different issue. But once we connected together and we got involved with the community, we saw that what they really needed was something health related. So our focus completely shifted, and the solutions that we developed were consequently more adequate for them. So now going to a second part of what you asked, which is how can engineering students get involved in problems that matter? The first question I would ask is, what problems matter? Because I think that is subjective to perspective. I don't know, for example, Jeff Bezos wants to go to the moon, wants to go to Mars. Elon Musk's interest and the problems that matter to him are getting a spaceship that will go to Mars. But that would not be a problem that matters to me, for example. So it's a lot of perspective. Another example is the use of masks. This is like a very current thing. With COVID, what we have seen is that a solution that was proposed was that mask would be used. And this is prioritized because it's important for health, but it's bad for the environment. So in this sense, what matters most, people's health or the fact that masks are bad for the environment? So thinking about the problems that matter is very subjective. For students, my advice would be to think first on their local surroundings and the impact that they can cause on their own communities, because adding those things will then lead to global impact. And that takes me to another point, which is, what is your purpose? Is your purpose creating global impact just because you want greatness, or because you want to improve the livelihoods of communities? So if you're doing it for the first, then sure, try to tackle a global challenge, but that's very intimidating. So if we stay in the mindset that STEM is mainly for, a tool to improve the livelihoods of people, then what we will want to do is think global, but start acting locally. So things that students can do is, for example, joining organizations within their local environment, joining also global networks. It will give them a platform and capabilities to act locally, and that will give them experience. Something else that they can do is participating in design challenges. Some of these are free for students, and again, it'll give you experience and it'll give you cultural and social capabilities that you might not acquire in a student environment. And finally, just focus. My advice would be focus on the little things that you can actually be a part of and that you can change. And those little improvements will amount to something greater.
Wow, thank you so very much. Thank you so very much, Maria Laura. Think global, act local. Participate in engineering challenges, focus on the issues that you have within your local space and try to solve them. Thank you so very much for that really insightful one yet again. I will maybe just tee off this time to Rodrigo. We've heard what Maria Laura has said about how, young professionals, young engineers can actually get ready to solve complex global challenges and how they can apply their skill set expeditiously. So just thinking about the things that you said and how that ties into the points that Maria Laura has just made, how can young engineers set themselves up for a successful career progression? I mean, you're working with quite a number of young engineers, you're leading that space, young professionals, and I reckon it's something that you might have talked about a number of times. So how can, in your mind, how can they set themselves up for a successful career progression?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there are so many things that you're all saying that are very interesting, which I definitely have also thought. And I think that there is some very important things to say about this, because first of all, whenever you are choosing, I would say the career that you want to develop in, I would my first suggestion is I would encourage young engineers, let's say, or people that are finishing their studies, is try to get involved in different types. First of all, if you are getting a job, try to get different perspectives of that profession that you are working on. Try to know and understand the broader area of influence that your career has, to choose what you want or what you like most. I mean, it's great that when you are young, it's great that you have multiple jobs, that you get involved in with different organizations to know which one you like, and taking something that also Nadia was saying, to choose what's your passion and where you think where you can make a greater contribution and what's your purpose for it. The other thing, definitely, I think it's very important, is that you have to understand that it's something that not everyone can do, alone. My suggestion is always try to get some kind of advice, perhaps engage in a mentorship program, try to get someone that at least has some experience in the field that you want to develop, because the reason they are in that position is because perhaps the failures or the mistakes they have lived through their lives. So it's always great to learn from someone that has been living that in previous, I know it's different generations, different years, but it's always great to know what they have gone through to get to where they are now. Also, one of the things that Maria Laura is saying, and I think it's very important, it's to volunteer, because many people, when you start working, when you start engaging, you want to get a good job that pays great money, and you want to be in a high position, and you always want to get that instant gratification, as Nadia is saying, and that's not the right way to do it, because then the mentality is going to be focused on how you make or how you improve your life in a short term. When you volunteer in something, you try to understand the needs of your community, the needs of your country, perhaps what areas of improvement the sector that you are doing on actually requires. For example, I'm a civil engineer, so many people that I know think that you are a civil engineer, you build stuff, and then you just keep building, and then you forget about what's happening. But you need to understand that when you are building something, it doesn't have to be just the edifice or the structure or the set piece of infrastructure that you are developing. You are providing a service, you are developing a need for the wider society that is going to be using that. It's a wastewater treatment plant, if it's a highway, if it's a bridge, fair enough. But what's the purpose of that? It's not just about building. Also, when you volunteer, it's about engaging and networking with the people that are involved in that sector, but also the areas of influence that that sector has with other aspects of the community. Because in the end, we all work together for something wider. And when you stop thinking about the instant gratifications and you put effort into the volunteering works you do, your work will be noticed, of course. And we should stop focusing, we should focus on the long-term benefits and not the short-term rewards. And finally, I would say that one common mistake that I see in general is that many people think that once they get out of college, or university, or whatever you want to call it, is that they know everything they need to know to start working and to creating an impact, and that no one's gonna teach them anything. And I think that the mistake is thinking that you know everything, when in fact, I mean, might not sound very nice, but it's like you don't know anything. You need to learn, because real life is very different from university, and you need to understand that you need to you're gonna be continuously learning as you are progressing. And it's natural that we don't know everything, because we are constantly facing new challenges, new struggles, new trends, new problems that we don't know how to fix, but that's part of the challenge. So you always have to keep, it doesn't matter if you're doing a master's, a PhD, a diploma, if you're going to a workshop, if you suddenly you're an engineer and want to learn finance or you want to learn history, it's fine. But it's a matter of continuously learning about different disciplines that can broaden your perspective to contribute to what you want to do, and not just think that just because you are an engineer, that's all you need to do and just stick with that. So, I mean, that would be my comment. You need to consider how you can contribute and how you want to develop, not just the immediate rewards, and it's a path that takes time. It's not something that you're just going to achieve from one day to another.
Wow. Thank you so very much, Rodrigo. If I summarize what you said, you've touched on quite a number of fantastic points there. The summary I'll put to it would be lifelong learning. You mentioned mentorship. Mentorship is looking at those that have gone ahead of you to see if you can learn a thing or two about the things that they've done and the mistakes they've made. Understand social impact, see engineering as a service, volunteer as wide as you can, engage and network to understand the intersection between engineering and other social disciplines. Maria Laura has talked about that. Firas has talked about that. Nadja touched on that as well. Do not focus on instant gratification and reward, but on developing a solid technical foundation. Wow, thank you so very much for those fantastic snippets there. I think there's a question that every young engineer, every young professional always asks, and it's a question of what the future looks like. And I'm going to come to Nadja to ask that question. Nadja, what kind of engineering leaders will the world need over the next 25 years?
Wow, that's a big question. And I think that ties a lot together what we've been talking today. So I won't repeat everything what we have said in the last 50 minutes, but yes, I mean, what kind of engineering leaders we need? We need you, each one of you here, who is sitting here on the panel, but also who is listening to us most likely. I guess you're asking about the characteristics of leaders, and I don't want to sound cheesy, but I genuinely believe everybody has the capability and the potential of being a leader. And just also looking at definitions, like definitions vary, but for me, a leader is someone who wants to serve and who, like touching about what Rodrigo said, who's also humble to know that, like, you're here actually to, actually what everybody says, you're here to actually try to improve the world, to improve our future, because this is what we want in the future, right? We don't want to go downhill. We don't want to, I don't know, in 25 years, we may have children who are already like old enough, who have a conscience about the world. I don't want to be the person who says, oh, sorry, I knew we could have done something, but well, the predictions have come true now that, I don't know, global warming has wiped away some islands or whatever. I don't want to be at that spot. So I want to be someone who can serve. And I also hope that those who want to become leaders, first of all, have servant leadership in their mind, who are also humble enough to always learn, like we touch upon the lifelong learning part, because technologies evolve, the world evolves, things change. And we already talked about the passion, the vision that someone should have, the bigger picture. Also what Maria Laura said about thinking global and acting local, because it ties back to having like the whole picture in your mind, because you should not only like every day work on something small, but you don't even know where it would fit in the world. But on the other hand, you should also not, because like global is also quite an abstract thing to do, no? Like sometimes if you're saying you're trying to tackle a global challenge, it's really hard to pinpoint then, okay, what exactly can I do now? So this is where I also think the acting local part is so important, to just have the puzzle pieces together, because you cannot like puzzle together something if you don't have a piece, you know? So I think all of this is a combination of efforts. We talked about interdisciplinarity. I also believe like within the engineering leadership, like one characteristic you should have is like the humbleness to learn from other disciplines, and also to understand that you just don't know sometimes, and you will also not be able to know everything what other people have like learned over decades or years. So you need to team up with them, because only like with a interdisciplinary team is it more likely that you can actually achieve like a solution that is applicable to many different fields and disciplines, and also ideally like is intergenerationally set out. So I think diversity in any aspect is important to, yeah, for the future, to tackle future problems, or also current problems. I have touched upon that part, but I personally think, for example, from the European perspective, why we're working so much on trying to bridge the policy and technology gap is because we just don't see so many engineering leaders in the public sector. We see some of them like being CEOs or like also managers in companies, especially industrial companies, which is great. We see like professors, we see like I don't know, lecturers, etc., in the academic field who can teach technical things. But in the public space, I mean, most of the European countries are based on democracy, which have evolved to that some certain disciplines like political science and law and economics are more present there, which is on the one hand important. But for me, when I was working in the German Ministry for Energy, like in the energy department, I was one of the only engineers with like technical knowledge, where they asked me as an intern some technical questions, where I was really worried, like, because this is the energy department of a country that is then meant to be a leading country in the climate path towards climate neutrality. And if you always outsource this knowledge, that means like, yeah, I think it shows a little bit of the prioritization and how the system has evolved. And this is where I didn't find it surprising why people were so annoyed with like Germany's wind farm regulations about the distances, etc., because I kind of understood who made these decisions. So I personally really want to encourage, especially like the members of our organizations, but also in general, to think about it, because I know that there are countries, like one politician from Spain told me, hey, look at China. There were like the majority of the leaders are having a STEM background, which I don't think will be possible, and is probably also not suitable for the European context. But they said maybe it has something to do with their innovation speed as well, because while we are all discussing about what's best, like some other countries might have already evolved and already practiced some solutions. So I do hope at least like those kind of political frameworks are set to be, yeah, that more technical expertise is flowing into when the decisions are made. And this is what I also was hoping, especially when I talked about COP26 today. When I was walking like there for 2 weeks at COP, I sometimes was wishing that there was more of an effort among young engineering organizations to be collectively present, because what I've seen is what was different to other COPs before, that climate activists, they come from all kinds of countries. They might not even be of one movement, but they have come together, they have written pledges together, and they knew targeted who they want to reach out to. But where I saw more, if engineering organizations or engineers were present, then they were doing like their small things, where I think maybe the acting local was present, but the thinking globally from the engineering perspective was not necessarily always there, where like policies are shaped or like specific targets for the world are shaped, because this is where at COPs the UN SDGs were shaped, which is like which is where the targets are set, and which is where we as engineers should try to see where we would fit in and like create solutions. So if we don't join efforts in that sense, I believe, I sometimes found it a little bit difficult to argue with someone about some targets where I just don't think they were technologically realistic to implement. So these are some of the thoughts, like time concluding what I meant with policy making and like bridging the gap. I just think in general, engineering leaders should try to think more outside of their own box, like outside of their like traditional capabilities. But of course, like if you feel very comfortable in your traditional discipline, don't force yourself to be someone you are not. But like I believe there are more people who were actually forced into the box where they didn't want to be always limited in. So the world is open. There's so much information and access, and there are so many great people here who want to take action. So I think, yeah, we just need to join them. And yeah, this is where I would hope that in 25 years, until 2050 almost, we have overcome certain things like being worried about whether we would achieve the 1.5 degree goals, for example. Yes, so I hope I hope we can make it. We can achieve the future. I'm positive, and I believe Firas, Maria Laura, and Rodrigo, Christopher, you are all doing amazing jobs. You're working really hard, and I can understand why you have become the leaders of your organizations, because I bet you have served a lot of people there, and people trust in these capabilities. But I hope that we can all, like each person feels like they can shine a light. May it be a big light or a small light. I think every light matters.
Thank you so very much, Nadja. Yet again, very well put. Thank you. Maybe to quickly highlight the points that you've made. Servant leadership, you touched on, very important. You touched on Rodrigo and Maria Laura's points on lifelong learning, understanding bigger pictures. And then you mentioned something that is becoming a catchphrase in this presentation that Maria Laura mentioned, which is think global, act local. You also touched on understanding diversity. You touched on more participation of young engineers, young professionals, leaders in policy development and policy making, learning from other contexts, other countries, other regions, and pulling together as a force, united force for good, so we can punch harder, increase the momentum of the potential action that we could have beyond just working in silos. There was a point you made about the presence of young engineers at the COP, and that was why I said you needed to maybe touch base with Firas, because I know Firas, there's a group in Firas's organization called the Climate Action Working Group, led by a lady called Milda Pladiaite, and she worked with some young engineers at the COP to develop a joint statement. And the joint statement pooled engineers and also young professionals from the World Bank, Youth for Climate, United Nations, Youth NGO, policymakers. That was how the two gentlemen I mentioned that are lobbyists in Belgium and in the Netherlands became involved. And they engaged quite a number of global leaders at the COP to ratify and sign that policy recommendation. There were 12 policy recommendations that were put forward. And right now they're working really hard to pull even more participation from young leaders and young professionals globally for COP27. So there's a lot of things that I think we need to, come together to understand as a group and work together towards achieving. So yeah, a fantastic presentation there, and a huge opportunity for growth, huge opportunity for driving change in our space, and also collaborating to make sure that the impact we make is a lot more felt. So fantastic one. I think I've just looked at the questions online, and I don't see any question just yet.
Just one final note, if you allow me.
Please, yes, go ahead.
It comes as a follow-up for what Nadja was talking about. When an engineer experiences career success, they are often steered in the direction of management. This is typical. There's always a natural push to spread the influence of our best people to management. However, I believe that the dream is to transform our most capable engineers to be like effective leaders for global changes.
Indeed, absolutely, absolutely. Beyond just traditional transition from being technical professionals to becoming managers in a corporate sense, it's also very important to look at opportunities for impact in the wider context. Thanks a lot for that, Firas. I see Maria Laura's hand up. Maria Laura, please.
Yes, if I can, thank you. If I can say something relating to what Firas just said and what Nadja was talking about, definitely our dream is to have more engineers and people from STEM involved in policy making and actually being able to make a change for the public. But I think part of the problem is that engineers often lack effective communication. And that is such an important part of being successful in whatever you want to do. If you want to be a successful engineer, whether you want to be a CEO and make money, or you want to do climate change activism, effective communication is so important. The first step is to be able to communicate your idea and make other people interested so that they can support you. So knowing how to pitch a project, thinking about things, being adaptable, having adaptability in your projects, and just the way that you communicate them is so important for what we want to do. So I encourage young engineers and students to learn more about effective communication. It'll change your lives.
Thanks a lot for that very beautiful point again. So adaptability, understand how best to communicate your ideas, develop your communication skills, vital to be able to drive the change that we want to have in the future. I think I will just throw the floor open to the panelists. If maybe you've got a point that you want to, deepen or talk about, please, by all means, you can do that as well.
Just a final remark. I like to thank our partners, our WFEO partners, SPEED, FIDIC, and European Young Engineers for being here together in this webinar, which will be broadcasted lively on the 4th of March, which is the World Engineering Day, which is an UNESCO day. Marked always on the March 4, and I'm happy that we shared the floor into giving like a shared young vision for the future of engineers and engineering. Thank you, Christopher, also for moderating this panel. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Thank you so very much, Firas. And on that note, if there's no other question or any other idea that's to be shared by the panelists, I don't see any question online. I want to say a very big thank you, just rehashing what Firas has said, to the partners and to the panelists and to everyone who's attended the webinar today. I hope we've been able to share some points that you find useful and insightful, and looking forward to the rest of the run up to the events of the World Engineering Day, 4th of March. And let's make it an exciting event, and have a pleasant rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you, everyone.